With so many scandals in politics, it's clear voters in both parties are tired of the establishment. So how will this shape the race for the White House? Joining me now from Washington, D.C., Associate Editor at the Weekly Standard, Ethan Epstein. Ethan, let's talk about this break from the norm. You know, it used to be you had to have decades of political experience to run for president of the United States and have credibility, probably because you had to owe a lot of people. But now we seem to be breaking away from that. How do you view this new movement?
Yeah, in fact, I think it even goes deeper than that. I don't think it's no longer that it's not necessary to have decades of experience in politics. I think we've reached the point where it actually detracts. It actually makes you a less appealing candidate to a large number of Americans if you've been involved in politics for too long. And that's because, unfortunately, the city I'm sitting in is deservedly unpopular. It's unpopular among both parties for reasons of corruption, due to the economy. I mean, there's a disgust, and there's a disgust with the people who are responsible for the state of the country, and those, unfortunately, are the politicians.
Well, you know, the root of a lot of that evil is money, and it's interesting that Trump's gaining a lot of traction because in the last debate, he even talked about the fact how he spread money around on both sides, in effect to buy favors, and no one challenged him on that. Did you find that as an interesting contradiction?
I did, and I actually thought that was one of the stronger moments of the debate because, you know, they try to pin Trump as, for example, being a liberal for donating to Hillary Clinton or for doing other things. But he made the very profound and serious point that when he's giving them money, it's not out of any sort of ideological agreement. It's because they're politicians and politicians can be bought. That was his experience as a rich businessman who's trying to influence politicians is proof positive of that, and he's the only one that can say it. And you're right, he wasn't challenged on it, which perhaps speaks even louder than that.
And how about the basic element of leadership? Is there a thirst for a different type of leadership, you know, beyond the political norm, looking for somebody who maybe has a corporate background, maybe doesn't? What's your take?
I definitely agree with that. And I think just sort of the charisma that a person who's not involved in politics and is always thinking of, ooh, what does the polling say if I say that? Or will this donor get mad if I say that? That has a sort of natural way that it limits what a person can say, and it makes them a less appealing person to watch. When you see a guy like Donald Trump or even Bernie Sanders up there, what they're doing is they're speaking charismatically because they don't have a filter. And that is another quality that attracts people, I think.
It's interesting. I guess there's a plus and minus to not having a filter. Donald Trump seems to be uniquely insulated against that. To some degree, I guess he's Teflon coated as well as our current president is from a leadership perspective. How do you see other candidates like Bernie Sanders, Carly Fiorina, Ben Carson, for example? How do you see them impacting the field as they move forward?
Well, on the Democrat side, I don't think it's so much that Bernie Sanders per se is a popular guy, but I think it's that somebody who is in his own way sort of anti-establishment and anti-politics. That all that matters is that he's that. It's not that he's Bernie Sanders. So I think if there were another candidate who were running against Hillary that was anti-establishment, they would be doing just as well. On the Republican side, if you look at the polls, the so-called anti-establishment candidates, if you include Trump, Fiorina, Carson, maybe Cruz in those, they're getting more than half the votes. So there's no doubt that there might be even a majority of primary voters who are going to go to whoever the establishment, or I should say the anti-establishment candidate ends up being.
You know, I think one of the fascinating things when you mentioned Bernie Sanders is the fact that he positions himself as a democratic socialist, and yet for years the Democratic Party has been stepping away from the fact, saying socialism is a bad word, you're trying to attach that to us, you're trying to disparage us. How do they square that with Bernie's stated position as being a democratic socialist?
That's a fascinating question. I mean, maybe they'll just point to the fact that even though, and it's kind of amusing, even though Bernie Sanders is running in the Democratic primary, he's not a Democrat. He's an independent. Yet he's still getting support from 30–40% of Democrats, which shows that a large percentage of people in the Democratic Party are not happy with the state of their party, I'd say.
What role do you think media is playing in this with their thirst for sensationalism? How is this playing out? You know, Trump is almost a carnival act from their perspective, and they seem to be thriving on that because it drives ratings. But what role does the media play in determining who's legitimate and who's not?
A big one, definitely. I mean, there's an idea that with social media, et cetera, the media aren't as important as they used to be in terms of, pushing candidates to the top or to the bottom. I think the Trump thing sort of shows that that's wrong. Why is Trump at the top? It's a big part of it is that he's on TV every minute of the day, it seems like. The media are still kingmakers, I think.
Well, I'll leave you with a concept that I pushed forward during my 2012 presidential campaign, and that's authenticity. I think America needs authentic leadership rather than made-for-TV leadership. Thank you, Ethan.